We're now 8 months into the war on Gaza, and the Israeli narrative that it will eradicate Hamas is unraveling from within. Plus, the coverage of two critically important election campaigns. South Africa, where the state-owned news channel is under the gun, and India, where artificial intelligence is wreaking havoc on the truth. This past week, the Israeli military intensified its assault on both ends of Gaza, north and south. Journalists are saying the bombing in the north is worse than anything they have seen since October 7th. At the outset of this genocidal war, Israel said it would destroy Hamas completely. The return of its operations in northern Gaza, where the Israelis had said they had dismantled Hamas, is one more sign that Israeli leaders have overestimated the capabilities of their own forces. And there is disquiet amongst the generals, divisions within the ranks. The defense minister has laid into Benjamin Netanyahu, saying the prime minister has some decisions to make on a post-war plan for Gaza. Across the border, in Egypt, there are signals coming out on state-controlled media outlets that the authorities in Cairo are losing patience with the Israeli government. Still, this is a war the vast majority of Israelis continue to support, and the domestic media coverage that they are seeing, as one-sided as it is a major reason for that. The intensity of what we are now seeing in Gaza makes it feel like we have entered some kind of time warp. Remember this from Israel's military spokesman? That was 4 months ago, in January. Then why are the Israelis bombing that same area, the north of Gaza, again now? Because that dismantling never happened. It was propaganda. Israel's lack of a coherent military strategy is now being revealed by Israeli officials themselves, with a clear divide developing between the defense minister and the prime minister over what happens when this war ends, the prospect of Israel taking over Gaza and resettling it.
מתפתחת מגמה מסוכנת המקדמת ממשל צבאי ואזרחי ישראלי ברצועת עזה.
Yoav Gallant said that he was entirely opposed to a military government over Gaza and also to a civilian occupation over Gaza, making very, very clear the rift between himself and Netanyahu. So this is being interpreted as Gallant trying to shed light on the strategic disagreement about the future of the assault.
The growing signs of unease within the Israeli military first surfaced this past weekend through a series of leaks that appeared to be coordinated. Several senior officers criticized Benjamin Netanyahu for a troubling lack of a post-war plan for Gaza.
צה"ל מתחנן כבר מדצמבר, שואל את הדרג המדיני, מה המטרה שלכם? והוא לא מקבל את התשובה.
The generals did not go on the record, but by speaking out anonymously and collectively, they put the lack of a plan for the day after, front and center, in Israel's discussion of the war.
When war becomes prolonged and there is no clear exit strategy, military generals often will come together and start issuing statements that reflect a lack of confidence in the way the government has been administrating the war. And so the coordination of generals often signals that the military is frustrated with the conduct of the direction of the war. And what's become clear with the prolonging of the war is that there is no clear tactical operational objective or clear exit strategy.
Since the beginning of the war, we've been hearing similar messages of discomfort that there's no strategic plan or end goal from retired military officials, that we're seeing it now coming from serving military officials, and that it's happening in a more coordinated manner, really reflects the growing frustration. You know, war is not a means by itself. It's a means of reacting to or creating different realities. And if you don't know what that reality is, then you're sentencing yourself to endless fighting, which, you know, unfortunately is the past 100 years of Israel-Palestine.
When it comes to Israeli media itself, there have been no filters. They've made incredibly inflammatory statements that have implicated them now in this case for genocide, to which Israel now has to answer for. You've also had Israeli media be very sanitized. I mean, the majority of Israelis don't actually realize the sheer extent of destruction, and yet you have numerous opinion polls showing that the majority of Israelis support the continuation of this onslaught. And where you have those that are calling for the end of it, it's more to do with the fact that they want their hostages back rather than the sheer scale of loss of life that Gazans are experiencing right now and will continue to experience.
The Israeli government will have also detected some ominous signs coming out of Egypt, with which it has had a peace deal in place since the Camp David Agreement in 1978. First, the Sisi government indicated it would sign up to South Africa's genocide case at the International Court of Justice, which no one saw coming. Then there was a call from a prominent Egyptian talking head to walk away from the Camp David deal.
أنا مش لازم أفضل ملتزمة بهذه المعاهدة اللي كل متغيراتها على الأرض اتغيرت. أنا عايز لبلدي معاهدة جديدة. أنا محتاج لبلدي معاهدة سلام جديدة. تليق بالقوة العسكرية المصرية الحالية.
And that was followed by an ambiguous warning to Egyptians about what may lie ahead.
اللي جاي صعب، يعني قد يبدو للبعض إن إحنا عدينا مراحل صعبة، لا ده أنا عايز أقول اللي جاي صعب.
Egyptian intelligence agencies maintain a firm grip on the country's media outlets, which suggests the change in messaging is coming from the very top.
Egypt has been very, very much deeply implicated into what has happened since the 7th of October. This is really PR management for the regime. At a time where many have been warning about a humanitarian catastrophe. And so now suddenly to see Egypt now allowing for the sort of criticism of the Camp David agreement within its own state-sponsored media, that is all very indicative of a regime that's trying to save face now.
The government might be using this media and these anchors as a way to accomplish three things. Now, the first is that there is increasing frustration within the Egyptian population about how their government has been treating the situation in Gaza, signaling that we hear you and we're reflecting your frustration. The second is to the American government, is that the Egyptian government today is increasingly unsure of where it stands, given that there have been aspects of the Camp David agreement that are on the brink of being violated. And so here it's signaling to the US, what are you going to do about it? And third, it's actually signaling to Netanyahu the frustration within the Egyptian government.
The Israelis have taken for granted that the two neighbors that it has peace with, Egypt and Jordan, are not big fans of Hamas, and therefore implicitly supported the goal of getting rid of them. But the fact that Egypt joined the ICJ case on genocide should be a shock to the Israelis. But I'm not sure that they're prepared to even receive warning signs.
8 months into its genocidal war on Gaza, Israel is growing more isolated, politically but also culturally, with Israeli artists, musicians, filmmakers, and publishers saying they are being shunned around the world. But rather than provoking a rethink, a re-examination of the strategy, the pressure from the outside seems to be stiffening attitudes in Israel. The blame for that will always start with the politicians involved. But the Israeli media, by letting so much genocidal language go unchallenged, at times making it their own, will never live this down.
כדי לנצח צריך לכבוש את רפיח עד המטר האחרון. אין שום דרך אחרת להכריע את חמאס.
The media narrative in Israel is insular, and it's central to public opinion.
People think that Israel's isolation and Netanyahu's isolation is actually going to put pressure on the Israeli public to end his reign. But what we're seeing on the media is this kind of Masada narrative or Samson narrative that is being pushed, that we are all alone.
אבל אנחנו אחרי המלחמה הזאת נצטרך פה בישראל לחשבת, לחשוב, לשאול את עצמנו, אוקיי, איך אנחנו מתמודדים עם הסיטואציה האמריקאית, כי האמריקאים ברצותם פשוט עוצרים פה את זכותה של ישראל מלהגן על עצמה.
We have no friends. We only have ourselves to rely on. Nobody is with us.
אם אנחנו צריכים לעמוד לבד, עומדים לבד. אם אפשר לגייס את הגויים, מה טוב. אבל אם אנחנו לא נגן על עצמנו, אף אחד לא יגן עלינו.
And that actually kind of creates this hardened shell from critique, in which any critique becomes perceived as part of this everyone is our enemy, everyone is against us.
One of the major themes of this war has been just parallel realities that different groups of people are living in, and Israelis are living in a reality in which regular Gazans almost do not exist. The media is focusing exclusively on victimhood and on the military narrative of what's being accomplished, without at all discussing the cost. It makes them double down, which makes it more and more of an existential issue, and it's a little bit of a feedback loop because they're just simply not being given the language to imagine that something could be done differently, that there could be diplomatic solutions, that perhaps not killing everybody is a way of doing things.
South Africans are voting this month, and for the first time in 30 years, the ruling African National Congress Party, the ANC, may fail to win an absolute majority. The party's response to that seems to include meddling with the national broadcaster, SABC. Meenakshi Ravi is here with more.
The ANC's rise to power in 1994 marked the end of South Africa's apartheid era. However, it's on the back foot in this election, with crime, unemployment and corruption among the issues in a country where racial inequality remains a reality. So the party has turned to nostalgia in its messaging, harking back to the days of Nelson Mandela and the ANC's central role in ending apartheid.
We've restored our people's dignity together.
One of the key narratives the ANC is battling is about the formation of a possible coalition government it might be forced to pull together. This was an ad put out by the main opposition group, the Democratic Alliance, or DA.
Imagine a coalition between the ANC, the violent EFF, and the Zuma faction. Under this coalition of corruption, life will only get worse.
The ad had some shock value, but the public broadcaster, SABC, was having none of it.
The SABC has rejected the DA's ad, which...
The DA said the SABC's rejection was a result of ANC interference, and that story of the ANC's control and manipulation of the country's largest broadcaster has dominated popular discussion. It was turbocharged by the fact that last month, the head of SABC News, Moshoeshoe Morare, was summoned by the State Security Agency to take a polygraph test, suspiciously close to the election, what many called a pressure tactic.
It just really feels strange to say you want an editor-in-chief to be subjected to this level of vetting.
The ANC has a long history of interfering with the SABC. Under former President Jacob Zuma, journalists were issued a happy news quota to paper over government failures. Things have been less censorious under incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa, but with elections this close, the SABC is clearly getting squeezed.
Thanks, Meena. In the world of politics, optics are everything. The way things look can be as important as the way they really are. Bending the truth can be part of the job, and artificial intelligence is here to help. The biggest election process in history is currently underway in India, and so-called deepfakes, highly realistic, entirely fake, AI-generated videos and audio are everywhere. Voters are seeing celebrities endorsing candidates they never actually endorsed, and dead politicians coming back to life saying or doing things they never actually said or did. Aware of the power of perception, political parties, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP, are jumping on this technology to sway votes. And it's not just India, because this is an election year for more than half of the world's population, and that has analysts warning that generative AI poses a threat to democracy. The Listening Post's Johanna Hoos now on technology that enables politicians to not just make fake content that looks real, but provides them with an opening to dismiss real content as fake.
What I believe is technology is neutral. For me, the AI is a kid. And it's up to you whether you want to make this kid a superstar, a scientist, or a kidnapper or a murderer. It depends on the parents. But if it is not regulated, it could be very destructive to the extent that we can't even imagine.
Divyendra Singh Jadon is known as the Indian deep faker. His company produces images, videos, and audio that look and sound real, but are entirely fake, generated through artificial intelligence. For years, Jadon reserved his AI trickery for Bollywood, swapping the bodies and faces of celebrities for entertainment. But in the lead up to India's general election, he discovered a lucrative new market: politics.
We started getting a lot of requests from political parties and PR agencies, political consultants. More than 200 requests from different parties, political candidates. Around 50% were unethical requests. One is to swap the face of opponent leader onto some controversial video that might impact his image. The second thing is to do the voice cloning of the opponent leader and make him say something that he has never said that can impact his image.
What was once hypothetical, are deepfakes going to have a big impact on elections? Are people going to try and use these in various malicious contexts? Is no longer hypothetical. Globally, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of deepfakes being used in political contexts, specifically to try and disrupt electoral processes or to spread disinformation. They are doing it, and they're doing it at scale, not just in India, but around the world.
Deepfakes got their start in pornography, fake, non-consensual sexual imagery posted online. But used as a tool to dupe and mislead, generative AI inevitably came crashing into the world of politics. The world's biggest ever election is currently unfolding in India, with nearly 1 billion Indians registered to vote. Political parties, including Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tech-savvy BJP, are using all tools in their arsenal to sway voters, including AI. Deepfakes are used to send personalized messages to Indians, even bring deceased politicians back to life. But some synthetic content is more malicious, like fake videos of celebrities criticizing Modi.
मोदी जी का पर्पस यही है, उनका उद्देश्य यही था कि वो सेलिब्रेट करे हमारी दुखी हुई जीवन और दर को, हमारी बेरोजगारी को, हमारी महंगाई को.
The Indian authorities are playing catch-up, trying to hunt down those behind the viral deepfakes. But by the time they catch them, in most cases, the damage has already been done.
We don't know what the true impact could be of AI and deepfakes and their ability to influence voters. It's still early days. But there was a survey done by a cyber firm called McAfee saying over the last 12 months, over 75% of Indians had been exposed to deepfake content either by way of audio or video. I think it often works in the interest of political parties to have grey zones on what AI does, on what deepfakes do, on what misinformation, disinformation and fake news does.
So obviously fakery, i.e. the manipulation of media, has been around for a long, long time. But what's really different about deepfakes is the realism of the outputs that can now be generated. And the problem is that deepfakes don't just make fake things look real, but it also provides plausible deniability and a reason that people could use to doubt whether real things are actually real and dismiss them as fake.
That problem is known as the liar's dividend, the benefit that anyone, including politicians, can get from the existence of deepfakes, to be able to cast doubt on reality and dismiss inconvenient facts. It creates a kind of omni-skepticism. All content, including what is real, can be devalued. And that's the dividend, the payoff for anyone who's out to disinform.
We got a query from a person who told us about our leader has a video and they think that the opponent might spread that video. That video is original. He told me the video is original. Now What he told me is you have to create a deepfake video. So we denied it. We don't do a deepfake without consent. So we said, no. You have to swap the face of the same person onto the same video, but it should look like a deepfake. So that once the opponent spreads it, we will spread it more than that, and later on we'll deny it, that it's not true, that it's a deepfake video. So this was very, very creative.
Politicians in India are generating low-quality videos of themselves so as to juxtapose that against a potentially authentic video and say, hey, it's all fake. There was a case a couple of months ago wherein a southern Indian politician said that a lot of his leaked audio was fake. When fact-checkers and those that are specialists in the area went back and examined it, they found that parts of the audio were fake, but parts of the audio were actually authentic. And I think that's going to be a huge theme going into 2024, which is an election year.
I sometimes refer to this as almost a kind of an epistemic nihilism. If I say to you, okay, well, you need to know that everything that you now see and hear could be AI generated, it could be fake, but I can't really tell you how to figure out what is real. That leaves you at a bit of an impasse. I do think that this is a really tricky moment where awareness of deepfakes is growing, and yet we don't have in place solution approaches, legislative approaches to sort of respond and help people understand better what they're seeing.
As ever, legislators are struggling to keep pace with the technology. Last year, the Indian government said that it did not intend to regulate AI. 3 months ago, just prior to the election campaign, it changed its mind after a journalist asked Google's AI software Gemini whether it thought Modi was a fascist, and the AI bot answered yes. Gemini justified its characterization on the ruling party's, quote, Hindu nationalist ideology, its crackdown on dissent, and its use of violence against religious minorities. Facts many human rights organizations agree on, but an answer the BJP called biased. And that's one of the many problems with regulating generative AI. Who should decide what's accurate, ethical, and unethical synthetic content? And who should have the responsibility to decide what content needs to be flagged as fake and when?
It is the responsibility of each and everyone. It's the responsibility of government. It's the responsibility of the big platforms, Meta, and it's the responsibility of creators like us and even the voters. If any content that is escalating your emotions to a next level, you should stop and think about it whether to share it or not. But still, people want to see what they want to see. So if any content is aligning with their preconceived notions, they are not going to fact check. What they want to believe, that's their ultimate truth. It's a big issue, and it's very concerning.
Concerning not just in India, but the world over, in a year when more than half of the globe's population in more than 60 countries is heading to the polls. AI analysts warn that synthetic content, if left unchecked, could influence billions of voters and upend democratic processes. But the problem isn't just AI. It's the political context in which this content thrives. A polarized world in which politicians like Narendra Modi fan the flames of division.
क्या आपकी मेहनत की कमाई का पैसा घुसपैठियों को दिया जाएगा? आपको मंजूर है ये?
I think when we talk about AI or deepfakes and we talk about the impact on democratic processes around the world, India is a good example to think hard about what's going on there on the ground. You have the Prime Minister of India is standing up and singling out a single community, the Muslim population in India, identifying them as infiltrators, as the evil party attacking India, and Hindus depicted as gods and goddesses trying to protect their space. What AI is reflecting is deep societal conflict, and I think AI will add one level of complexity to it, but it would be remiss of us to not accept the fact that there are other very, very deep problems at play here.
And finally, last week, the New York Times published a story about the coverage of Gaza that was more revealing than the paper probably intended. The piece focused on alternative news sites, including Al Jazeera, that are proving popular with younger American audiences these days, including student protesters. The article said that although major news outlets like the New York Times and CNN have reported extensively on Israel's campaign in Gaza, the coverage, in the view of student protesters, doesn't assign enough blame to Israel for Palestinian deaths. But in that same article, the Times says 2 Al Jazeera journalists have died since the start of the war. Died of what? Cancer? One of those journalists, Samer Abu Daqqa, was targeted by an Israeli drone. In a nutshell, that is the New York Times telling its readers what young Americans object to in its reporting and then doing more of it. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.